day I met Samuel Baker. He was lying in front of my house, covered in blood. I was so scared that I panicked. But after calming down, I dragged him into the house. Years later, I regretted this action countless times. But if given the chance again, I would still do the same. Because Samuel had a handsome face. His features were as exquisite as if they were modeled. I don't have many hobbies, except for a special fondness for handsome guys. I have to say that Samuel chose the right place to collapse. Right in front of a doctor's house. As a doctor, I always have a medical kit at home. Fortunately, his injuries were just superficial. And not life-threatening. I skillfully bandaged his wounds. And stared at his face, lost in thought. Soon, he regained consciousness. Only then did I learn that he had been attacked by an enemy. All the bodyguards following him had died. And he was the only one who escaped. He immediately contacted someone to pick him up. And before leaving, he said he wanted to repay me for saving his life. Asking if there was anything I wanted. I shook my head. Saving people is a doctor's duty. Besides, he was so good-looking. It was a feast for my eyes, a reward in itself. Seeing that I really didn't want anything, he chuckled softly and asked, "Then do you want to come with me?" Looking at his dazzling smile, I impulsively agreed. I grew up in an orphanage, alone, with no attachments. I followed Samuel to City C and became his private family doctor. As usual, Samuel had to go on a business trip to a remote place abroad. And he took me along. When he discussed business, he was aggressive. A far cry from his usual gentle demeanor. But that didn't stop me from being fascinated by his face. He seemed to notice my gaze, looked towards me, and I guiltily averted my eyes, only to see a man with a crazed, hateful expression approaching him. Without thinking, my body instinctively threw itself at Samuel. Before I passed out, I saw his slightly surprised expression. When I woke up, I found him sitting by the bedside, watching me. Seeing me awake, his eyes were filled with gentle emotion. He raised his well-defined hand to stroke my face. "You've saved me twice now." I stared blankly at his handsome face. This sudden intimate gesture made my heart skip a beat. "What do you want this time?" I shook my head. "I don't want anything." He flashed a dazzling smile, making one's heart itch. "You seem to like me a lot. Do you want to try being with me?" I was so mesmerized by his smile that I couldn't help but nod. Since then, I moved into Samuel's villa and started living together with him. But Samuel was often so busy that he was hardly ever seen. Sometimes I only saw him 3 or 4 times a month. In the second year of living together, on my birthday, he was supposed to be away on business, but suddenly appeared in front of me. He mysteriously took my hand, saying he wanted to take me somewhere. He blindfolded me and took me to an amusement park. I didn't know how he found out about my childhood wish. When I was a child, I longed to go to the amusement park. Other kids were taken there by their parents, but I could only watch enviously, like a little thief peeking at others' happiness. At that time, I thought to myself, my happiness would just be a little late. One day, I would go to the amusement park with the most important person in my life. That day, we tried all the rides, and finally, we got on the Ferris wheel. When we reached the highest point, he suddenly kissed me. I heard that kissing the one you love at the highest point will bring a lifetime of happiness. I thought he was silly for believing such a thing, but I couldn't help feeling secretly delighted. His eyes were filled with gentle emotions as he kissed my cheek, treating me like the most cherished person. The dim lights reflected in his eyes, like dazzling stars, bright and charming. At that moment, I realized I had completely fallen into the web of love he had woven for me, but I was happy to do so. After celebrating my birthday with me, he rushed off to another city. He was still very busy, but he seemed to care more and more about me. Every now and then, I would receive gifts from him, sometimes an expensive necklace, sometimes a bouquet of fresh flowers. No matter what it was, I loved it. Because it meant he cared about me. I couldn't help but think, maybe he liked me too, even if it was just a little. I was already very satisfied. We had done the most intimate things a couple could do. Even in bed, he was extremely gentle. He would softly coax me to relax, kissing me gently over and over again, even though he was holding back with all his might. I became more and more certain that he liked me. After all, if he didn't, why would he be so reluctant to let me feel any pain? But gradually, I began to realize that his affection for me seemed a bit different. His affection wasn't like that of a lover, but like the affection one has for a cat or a dog, a desire to possess. He was willing to spend a lot of money on me, buying various expensive gifts, just to make me happy. But those gifts were chosen by his assistant, he hadn't put any thought into them. He never told me about his life. All I knew was that he had numerous businesses and substantial wealth, nothing more. Since being with him, he had me quit my job at the hospital. As time passed, I started to miss working. Having something to do would keep me from constantly wondering if he loved me. I mentioned a few times that I wanted to go back to work. He would just look at me gently and coax me in a soft voice. "I want the first person I see when I come home to be you." The tenderness in his eyes made me give in time and again. But this was just his way of keeping me. He did like me, but it was the kind of affection one has for a pet. I was like a bird kept in a gilded cage. And that was indeed the reality. Samuel brought a few friends home for the first time. He seemed to be preparing to introduce me to his friends, and this thought filled me with excitement and joy. But reality gave me a harsh slap in the face. I was about to knock on the study door with carefully prepared snacks when I heard a voice. "Sam, I heard that girl has been with you for quite a while now. Are you really into her this time?" My raised hand paused in midair as I anxiously waited for Samuel's response. There was a long silence inside, and just when I thought I wouldn't get an answer, a familiar voice spoke. "I just keep her around as a pet to play with when I'm bored. Every time I see her, her eyes sparkle, and she runs to me wagging her tail like a little puppy, so obedient and cute. She's too obedient, making it hard for me to let go." I stood at the door, listening, feeling bitter inside, tears unknowingly streaming down my face. "No wonder you never bring her out to meet us. It seems she's just a bird in a gilded cage, someone to amuse you when you're happy, nothing too important." Mocking laughter came from inside, and I didn't listen any longer, turning to leave. That night, before bed, Samuel noticed my low spirits. He came over, hugging me, and whispered softly in my ear, "What's wrong?" I shook my head, looking at his genuinely concerned eyes, and couldn't help but ask, "Do you love me?" "Of course," he answered without hesitation, his eyes full of deep affection, as if he hadn't said those words that afternoon. Before I could continue to question him, he eagerly kissed me. Unspoken words were drowned in our entwined lips and tongues, and we clung to each other under the moonlight like true lovers. Gradually, I began to convince myself that as long as he had me in his heart, it was enough. Even if it was a pet-like affection, I didn't mind. I couldn't let him go. The occasional love he showed me made it impossible for me to leave. I craved love too much, clinging to him like a drowning person to a lifeline. I thought I would continue this ambiguous entanglement, hoping that one day he would truly fall in love with me. With this thought, I waited foolishly and obsessively. I waited and waited, but in the 5th year, I received news of his marriage. Samuel was about to get married, and I found out about it from the news. He didn't seem to plan on telling me. As the days drew closer to their wedding, he remained as close to me as ever, without any intention of mentioning it. I finally couldn't hold it in any longer, my fingers turning white as I gripped them tightly and spoke with a trembling voice. "Are you getting married?" His expression didn't change, not a hint of panic at being exposed. "Yes." "What about me? What should I do?" The smile on his face was so gentle it felt fake, and his words were cold and unfeeling. "You'll continue being my lover. My marriage to her is just a business arrangement. We won't interfere with each other's lives after the wedding." After saying that, he gave a mocking smile, making him seem like a stranger. "You didn't think I'd marry you, did you? I can give you anything you want, except for marriage. Of course, you can also choose to leave. I'll give you a generous breakup fee." I knew that someone like him would never marry me. I never had such an extravagant hope. But hearing this cruel truth from his own mouth, my heart still couldn't avoid being torn apart. I could quit my job and stay home as a kept woman for him, and I could endure being treated like a pet. But I absolutely couldn't accept being a despised third party because I still had some basic moral principles. I was never part of his future. I was just an insignificant lover who could be discarded at any time. When this realization flashed in my mind, I couldn't help but chuckle. Even though my heart felt like it was being slashed open, and the pain made it hard to breathe, I didn't shed a single tear. Maybe when people are truly sad, they really can't cry. I thought it was time to leave. I should have let go long ago, but I stubbornly held on until now, only to end up completely bruised and battered. Let's break up. Since I could never have him, I chose to leave his world. After breaking up with Samuel, I left City C. I didn't go back to my hometown. Instead, I went to a new city. I wanted to abandon everything from the past and start a new life. But even so, I still couldn't control my heart. I couldn't help but trace Samuel's familiar features over and over again in my mind late at night. I couldn't help but curse myself. How despicable, to yearn for a married man, especially when he never loved me. I began to learn how to numb myself with alcohol. As long as I got drunk, I wouldn't think about anything and could sleep peacefully until morning. A bar is a place full of mixed characters, always with ill-intentioned men eyeing single women like hunters watching their prey, waiting for the right moment to strike. Inevitably, I became someone else's prey when I got drunk. Just as I was desperately trying to break free from the hands that were forcibly taking me away, a deep, commanding voice rang out. "Let her go. She doesn't want to go with you." The man cursed, "None of your business." But he fell silent and became submissive upon seeing the other person's face, quickly finding an excuse to leave. I thanked the newcomer and learned that he was the owner of the bar. After that incident, I always stayed alert when I went to the bar and never drank myself into oblivion again. But from then on, I always ran into that man. He would always greet me, and over time, we became friends who could chat a bit. I thought my life would gradually become peaceful and that I would slowly get over the past. But in the 4th month, Samuel came looking for me. When he found me, I was at the bar laughing and chatting with Theo. Oh, by the way, Theo is the owner of the bar. The moment I saw him, I wasn't surprised that he had found me. Given his family's background and resources, finding an ordinary person like me was no big deal. I was just puzzled as to why he was looking for me. He looked exhausted, much thinner than before, but his gaze was as gentle as ever. "Bella, stop this and come back with me." I didn't understand why he suddenly regretted it, but there was no way I was going back. "You were the one who told me to leave. But I regret letting you go. I thought you loved me so much that you wouldn't want to leave." His expression was very remorseful, as if he truly regretted letting me go back then. "As long as you come back with me, you can have anything you want. Then divorce her and marry me. I just want you to give me a home." "Can you do that?" "No, anything but that." "Then there's nothing more to say. That's all I want." That day, we parted on bad terms, but I knew he wouldn't give up so easily. Theo had wisely left the moment Samuel showed up, and when he returned, he saw me drinking heavily. "Is he your boyfriend?" I shook my head, a mocking smile on my face. "No, we're just in a benefactor and mistress relationship. I'm just his lover." He stared at me for a few seconds and then said with certainty, "You love him very much." "I just love his money." "Then why are you crying so sadly?" "Am I?" "I just got something in my eye." I wiped the tears from my face, forcing a smile that looked worse than crying. He didn't expose my lie, but instead offered an enticing proposition. "Do you want me to help you?" To make Samuel give up on the idea of taking me back, Theo pretended to be my boyfriend. But we both knew that Samuel wasn't easily fooled. If we didn't act convincingly, he would see through it. To avoid any flaws, I moved into Theo's house and stayed in the guest room. We started to act like a couple, but only when we were outside. At Theo's house, we just chatted like regular friends, talking about life, and surprisingly, we got along well. Outside, I would hold Theo's hand as we strolled and watched movies, like a real couple. Sure enough, Samuel had someone watch me, and it wasn't long before he couldn't hold back and came to see me again. He was furious, with none of his usual gentleness. Bella, my patience is limited. I don't think you want to see me truly angry. I replied calmly, I already have a boyfriend. You know that very well, don't you? His eyes flickered, and then he let out a cold laugh. Don't think I'll believe you just because you found some random guy to fool me. Come back to me obediently before my patience runs out. By the end, his tone turned icy, as if he had torn off his gentle mask and revealed his true face. I lowered my eyes and spoke after a while, I want a home. Can you give me that? He took a deep breath, seemingly irritated by my question. I can buy you lots and lots of houses. I chuckled softly, looking at him with eyes full of sorrow. You know what I mean. What use are empty houses? All I want is a home filled with love. But what I wanted was exactly what he couldn't give. If you can't give me that, then stop coming to me. With that, I turned and walked away without looking back. This was his last chance. There wouldn't be another. Samuel's people were still watching me. Theo was a competent actor, dutifully playing the role of my boyfriend. But he seemed to be getting too into the role, often unable to resist making some intimate gestures towards me even at home. I started to sense something was off, and before things got more complicated, I suggested moving back. My cold expression was enough to explain the situation. He sighed and gave a bitter smile. I admit I was interested in you from the start, which is why I suggested pretending to be your boyfriend. It was to help you, but also to satisfy my own selfish motives. But after spending these days together, I've fallen deeper and deeper. I opened my mouth and finally said the hurtful words. You know, I still haven't gotten over Samuel Baker. The sadness in his eyes was almost overflowing. I know, but please don't rush to reject me, okay? Give me a chance, and give yourself a chance too, okay? I seemed to see my former self, humble and soft-hearted, and couldn't help but relent. After all, I had dragged him into this mess, and I had to take responsibility. I stayed, continuing to play the couple's act, and also to give him a chance. Since then, Theo's affection for me was no longer hidden but was openly displayed. As a doctor, sometimes a single surgery could take an entire day, leaving no time for meals in between. After he learned this, he would inquire about my daily work schedule and wait in my office with a meal box on the days I had surgeries. He wasn't good at cooking. Initially, he would bring takeout from restaurants. But soon enough, he started cooking the meals himself. The first time he did, I noticed immediately, "Did you make this?" He scratched his head awkwardly, looking a bit embarrassed. Yeah, I heard people say restaurant food isn't very clean. You didn't seem to enjoy the takeout I got you before, so I thought I'd make something you like. I smiled and didn't say anything more. Once, after a long surgery, my feet were sore and aching. While eating, I unconsciously rubbed my leg, and he immediately noticed, lifting my leg onto his knee and started massaging it. Seeing the worried look on his face, I swallowed back my words of refusal. Theo was also very busy. He owned several bars, and even though there were managers overseeing them, there were still countless trivial matters to handle. These days, he came home very late, often at 3 or 4 in the morning. I advised him to stop spending time cooking and delivering meals for me, but he shook his head and refused. Work never ends, but the time I spend with you is too short. I cherish every minute and second. When I was with Samuel, he was so busy that he didn't even have time to pick out a gift for me. Back then, I never complained, just felt sorry for how busy he was. Now I realize, it was just that Samuel didn't love me enough. Theo made me understand that being busy and being in love are not mutually exclusive. He was very busy too, but that didn't stop him from loving me. What Samuel never gave me, Theo is now taking me to experience one by one. He invites me out to watch movies, eat meals, and sometimes just to stroll around. During holidays, he carefully prepares a gift for me. The gifts are not expensive, but they are filled with thoughtfulness. One memorable gift was a scarf he knitted for me himself. It wasn't perfect, but the shy expression on his face when he handed it to me made me laugh. He said it was his first time making one, that he wasn't very skilled yet, and that he would give me better ones in the future. But to me, it was already the best. The love he gives me is open and generous, sincere and passionate, gradually finding its way into my heart. Whenever I have free time, Theo takes me on trips outside the city. In less than 2 years, we have visited all the popular tourist spots in the country. He always prepares detailed itineraries, so I don't have to do anything but follow him. Eventually, this evolved into him organizing my life as well, and I started to rely on him more and more. Like a frog in warm water, without realizing it, he had become an indispensable part of my life. In the second year of our acquaintance, on New Year's Eve, the crowd was bustling, and brilliant fireworks lit up the sky. At some point, my hand was grasped by a pair of large hands, fingers interlocked. I looked at the person beside me and saw him looking down at me, his eyes brimming with affection. It turns out that when you love someone, you can't hide the affection in your eyes. I felt overwhelmed by this intense love and wanted to pull back, but he held my hand tightly and cautiously asked, "Will you be my girlfriend?" Wrapped in his fervent love, the wounds in my heart slowly healed, and I gradually let go of Samuel. I didn't dislike Theo, I undoubtedly liked him, but my feelings were cautious. I didn't want to lose everything again. After a moment of thought, I asked the question I had asked Samuel many times without receiving a clear answer. "I want a home. Can you give me that?" He looked surprised. As expected, despite anticipating this reaction, I couldn't help but feel the urge to cry. Suppressing my disappointment, I forced a stiff smile and was about to explain that I was just joking. The next moment, Theo hugged me tightly, his voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I'll give you a home." I was stunned, and when I came to my senses, my face was already streaked with tears. It turns out that extreme happiness can also bring tears. Tears are not just a manifestation of sadness but also an embodiment of happiness. The girl who could only enviously watch others be happy has finally found her own happiness. In the past 2 years, Samuel hadn't come looking for me, and the people he sent to monitor me gradually disappeared. I thought he had completely given up on making me return. After all, in his eyes, I was just a pet he couldn't bear to part with. If I was disobedient, there was no need to keep me by force. But just when I was gradually forgetting him, Samuel reappeared. He looked excited, and when he saw me, he hugged me tightly as if holding a lost treasure. "Bella, didn't you want a home? I'll give it to you." I listened without any expression on my face and just shook my head. He, however, seemed not to see it and began to speak endlessly. "I've made an agreement with her. After giving birth to an heir, we'll divorce, and then I can marry you immediately." I was initially indifferent, but upon hearing that, an infinite disgust began to spread in my heart. A child should be a product of love, not brought into this world for some purpose. He finally sensed something was wrong. He examined my expression carefully and began to panic. "Why aren't you happy? Isn't this what you've always wanted?" Having a home was indeed my dream, but I had already achieved it. I was no longer the pitiful girl begging for his love. I had received a lot of love, accumulated a lot of confidence and courage. I could now face Samuel calmly and firmly reject him. No need. I already have a home. Samuel stepped back a few paces in disbelief, shaking his head and repeatedly saying it was impossible. He forced a smile, cautiously seeking confirmation. "You're lying to me, right? It's to get back at me, isn't it? I was wrong before. I know that now. Please give me another chance, okay?" I sighed, deciding to make him give up completely, and spoke decisively and resolutely. "I waited for you for a long time and gave you many chances, but you came too late. Actually, just because I didn't say it doesn't mean I didn't know. You always thought I was after your money. You might not believe it, but initially, I was just attracted to your looks. Later, I got greedy and tried to get your love. It was my overestimation. I knew he only appeared gentle and easygoing on the surface, but he was very guarded. The naive me once thought I could change him, but it was just a foolish dream. I was very fortunate to escape that unrealistic dream in time. Now I have a new lover. He loves me very, very much. What you were unwilling to give me, he holds in his hands and presents to me. I am very satisfied with my current life, living happily. We were originally from two different worlds, mere passers-by in each other's lives. You just can't bear to let go of an obedient pet. You don't love me. Maybe he did love me, but his love was stingy and prickly, hurting me all over. Samuel was already sobbing uncontrollably, whimpering like a child, sad and helpless. His eyes were full of despair, as if he had realized that he was no longer in my eyes. "If you want to make it up to me, there's indeed one thing I want to ask of you." His face lit up with hope, eagerly asking me, "Tell me, I'll agree to anything." I stared seriously at his face and cruelly spoke. "Don't come and disturb my life anymore. That would make me hate you. Don't exhaust the last bit of warmth I have for you." After I finished speaking, he started laughing and crying simultaneously, like a madman. I ignored him, having said everything that needed to be said. Some people are ultimately just passers-by, meeting once was already beautiful. Since then, I never saw Samuel again. Theo and I lived a simple but happy life. After our marriage, his care for me remained unchanged. It wasn't long before I became pregnant. Our baby was born smoothly with our anticipation. Theo felt sorry for the 10 months of suffering I endured and took care of everything related to the baby himself, so I didn't have to worry at all. "Honey, pass me a diaper, the baby is about to cry again." From the initial chaos to the current ease, Theo had become a competent dad. Seeing his serious face, I couldn't help but lean in and kiss his cheek. The future is still long, but I'm not afraid at all. My happiness will continue indefinitely. Samuel Baker's perspective. Unexpectedly, an accident led me to meet an interesting girl. When I asked her what she wanted, she said she wanted nothing. This was the first time I met someone who didn't ask for anything in return. In the past, everyone who approached me wanted money. Looking into her clear eyes, I impulsively asked if she wanted to come with me. I was really curious whether she truly had no desires or if she was hiding them very deeply, wanting even more. I didn't care much about her and casually arranged a job for her, occasionally taking her along on business trips. I was often hunted by enemies, and after the last accident, I decided to keep a medical staff by my side, and she came to mind. But she saved me a second time, throwing herself at me without hesitation to block a fatal blow. I asked her again, no matter how much money she wanted, I would give it to her. After all, money was the least of my concerns. She still wanted nothing, just stared at my face, fascinated. It was really interesting. I always knew I looked good, but it was the first time someone stared at me so directly. Could it be that my face is more tempting than money? I laughed coldly inside. How could that be? She must be after something more. I tentatively asked if she wanted to be with me, and she nodded without hesitation. Indeed, she was a smart and ambitious woman, aiming for the position of the Baker family's mistress from the beginning. I didn't mind keeping her as a pet, buying her all kinds of luxury goods and giving her endless money, all because she saved me twice. Over time, I found she seemed genuinely affectionate towards me. Every time she saw me, her face lit up with joy, which I found quite endearing. On her birthday, I was supposed to fly out for a business deal, but it got cancelled last minute due to a major issue on their end. My assistant reminded me it was her birthday. I vaguely remembered checking her past when I brought her along and remembered she seemed to long for an amusement park. I took her to an amusement park, and when the Ferris wheel reached its peak, I couldn't help but kiss her and casually said something sweet. She seemed to believe it, her eyes shining with tears. That loving gaze softened my heart. I thought I should treat her better, so I started having my assistant prepare gifts for her before I got home. Every time she received a gift, her smile was so happy, which pleased me greatly. She was quiet and obedient, never disturbing me at work, and never refusing any of my requests. Even when I asked her to quit her job and stay quietly at home, she agreed. She probably liked her job a lot, mentioning a few times that she wanted to go back, but I refused. I just wanted her to stay at home as a pet, to amuse me when I was in a good mood. She was so obedient that I became quite fond of her, glad I kept her by my side, bringing me much joy. For the sake of my family's interests, I had to marry that woman. We both had our lovers and reached an understanding not to interfere after marriage. I didn't think it was necessary to tell her about the marriage, after all, she was just my kept woman, my mistress. But she seemed to forget her place, daring to question my marriage. Maybe I spoiled her too much, making her think I would marry her and let her be the madam of the Baker family. How could that be? She was a bit too greedy, daring to dream of that. I was a bit annoyed. If she couldn't accept continuing as my mistress, she could choose to leave. I was sure she wouldn't be willing to leave me, whether for the money or for me. But she chose to leave. I thought it was just a tactic, and she would come back to me within a few days. After the wedding, I returned to that home, habitually bringing along the gift my assistant had prepared for me. But the person who was supposed to receive it was no longer there. Even though it was just her absence, the house felt empty, and I inexplicably felt a sense of loss. While working late at night, I realized it was already 3 a.m. when a dull headache hit me. I habitually called out, "Bella," only to remember she had already left. When she was here, she would always bring me a cup of hot milk at this time and then tenderly give me a massage. Lying in bed, I couldn't fall asleep, her face constantly appearing in my mind. Days went by without any sign of her returning, but my longing for her grew wildly, like a seed sprouting uncontrollably. It felt like a part of my heart was missing, and I wanted to find her and bring her back. But she was stubborn to a terrifying degree. I couldn't understand why she was so insistent on that piece of paper. Was it really that important? I could give her everything except that, but her stubbornness made me leave in anger. Not long after, the person I sent to watch her told me she had a boyfriend. Rationally, I knew this was just a tactic to make me compromise, but when I saw the intimate photos of her with another man, I couldn't contain my anger any longer. I was already trying hard to control my emotions, or I feared I would break her limbs and imprison her, so she could never leave my side. I was never a good person, just reluctant to go that far. But when I saw the look of despair and determination in her eyes, I panicked completely. She seemed to really want to leave me for good. I had already seen my heart clearly during these days. I could not lose her. The only way was to get a divorce. After returning, I negotiated a divorce with that woman, but she thought I was crazy. Are you insane? This isn't just about the two of us. It involves the interests of both families. I was indeed on the brink of madness. If Bella really left, I feared I would lose it completely. In the end, we agreed that we would divorce after having an heir, who would serve as a bridge between our two families. But before having the heir, I absolutely could not go find Bella. If you make me unhappy, how could I let you live comfortably? If you go to her before I have the child, don't expect me to agree to the divorce. That woman always meant what she said. I could only suppress my longing and not go to her, but the photos sent by the people watching her always included that man, and her increasingly sweet smile pierced my heart. In a fit of anger, I withdrew the people watching her. She would surely wait for me, I kept telling myself over and over again. Finally, after the heir was born, I eagerly went to find her. I thought she would definitely be happy because I could finally give her what she wanted. But to my utter surprise, she no longer needed it. Her eyes no longer held any love when she looked at me, as if she was looking at someone irrelevant. When she mentioned that man, her face was full of happiness, something that once belonged to me. The pain in my heart was so intense it felt like it was tearing apart, making me almost suffocate. Her heartless words blocked all the things I wanted to say. She begged me not to disturb her life anymore. Swallowing the metallic taste in my throat, I thought that maybe not disturbing her was the only thing I could do for her now that she was so happy. In the end, I completely lost the girl who once had eyes only for me. From then on, the long road of life was accompanied only by endless longing.